Hi, welcome back to week 5 of our Journey to Easter podcast, where we're taking some time to talking about Jesus. And today we're going to talk about wonder, about asking good questions. I'm Jen. I'm one of the vicars here, pastors in training at Christ Church. And I'm joined here by my esteemed panel, Bill, our groups director, our lead pastor, Pastor Andrew, also known as PA, and Sarah, our family ministries director. And at this time, Vicar Nathan is on vacation, and he normally shares something about us, an interesting fact about us. And today, we'd love to share with you an interesting fact about Vicar Nathan. So, Bill, what do you got for us today?
He is a disc golf professional, and don't call it frisbee golf. It's not frisbee golf, it's disc golf.
That's a good one. That's a good one. How about you, PA? Do you got one?
He is a Georgia Bulldog statistician aficionado junkie. He knows everything there is to know about the Georgia Bulldogs and loves them avidly.
That's football?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
yeah,
Thanks.
college ball, yes.
Okay.
Let's
Okay.
stick with
Awesome.
that. Yep.
Awesome. Sarah, how about you?
Nathan doesn't drink any hot liquids, so no soup, no hot chocolate, no coffee, nothing hot. And
Nothing
he's
hot.
pretty particular about his cold liquids as well.
No
Just
soda.
water.
I love it.
Nathan
Well, those are
drinks
great.
just
I was just going to mention that he buys most of his wardrobe on TikTok, but
Yes.
yeah.
TikTok. Why go to
Ti-
Kohl's when you have TikTok?
Yeah, exactly. So we've been starting each week by taking some time to share stories of when talking about Jesus has gone wrong. So do any of you have any stories this week to share about conversations gone wrong?
All right, what they're thinking, I was thinking about this previously because I've shared stories about where it's gone wrong by what I have said. This week, I wanted to share a story of it going wrong by not saying anything. One of the things that I'm conscious of is sometimes we have opportunities where we can say something, or we should, or where we ask a good question, or we receive a good question. And I can remember once sitting with somebody, it was in college, it was a great moment, connection, and they were sharing about some of their struggles. This was a guy who I knew lived on the same floor as I did, and he knew that I was a Christian, and I was really good at listening and spent time listening to him. And there was a moment where I should have leaned in and asked a question or shared, I think, some better clarity around my own Christian faith and the comfort that that brings me in those types of situations. But instead, I said nothing. And so a moment where it can go wrong talking about Jesus is where you don't even talk about Jesus. Just flat, quiet, right? But I do think that was a learning moment for me where it's like, don't be afraid of leaning in and asking questions and leaning in and trying to keep the conversation going rather than just letting the air out of the room and letting it all just kind of fizzle out. So that's one of my stories.
It's a good one.
I'm looking at
No
you
stories
guys.
today? No stories today?
I would have the same as PA, though, of times where now I can see it back. Times where I should have said something, but I didn't. You get comfortable in your comfort zone, especially if you know somebody a little bit more. The jump into that spiritual conversation can be daunting.
Yeah.
But also, you want to go like, if I ask a spiritual conversation, I haven't brought that up before, what does that do with our relationship? Now it's changed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I can see now points where I probably should have. But at that point, I was like, it was a risk, and I wasn't really willing to take that risk.
And sometimes we just don't feel ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, PA, we ask every week that you have a very short window for your sermons on Sunday mornings.
Very short.
Very short.
I want everyone to know how short it is. It's 25 minutes with some grace period in there, but I always have more to say. It's true.
Yeah. So I heard something about how there were originally like 64 slides with this sermon.
I had a lot of slides for this sermon, yes.
Yeah. So what? Tell us one thing that you really wish you could have fit in there this week.
So I had to really pare down the content this week. One of the great challenges with preaching is wanting to say everything. But it's far more important to say the right thing, and that means you have to cut a great deal. And so one of the things that I had to cut this particular week was how questions often, when we think about questions and the questions people have, usually it's in the realm of theology. Theology having to do with like the study of God and that which we think about God, that which we know and say about God, which is good, right, and rich. Like I love theology. I love studying it. I love thinking about it. It's what we draw from the scriptures and from our life experiences and the church and history and all these things. So there's theology on one side, but there's also the limiting factor of theology is the fact that it doesn't save. Faith is what saves. And there's a distinction between, right? So I think a lot of people feel the pressure to have really good theology when it comes to spiritual questions and spiritual conversations. The irony is you don't need to have a complete theology as much as you need to have faith. Faith is what's far more important, and that's what I was trying to allude to. It's okay to have questions and not have all the answers as long as you have faith in the person of Jesus. That's what matters. We're constantly working on our theology, but it is faith that actually saves and faith that is more important than anything else. So that was one of the differences that I would have loved to tease out a little bit more and spend some more time on. Just didn't have time to talk about faith and theology. Both appropriate, both good, and very helpful. But in the context of Sunday morning, not enough time.
And there's great humility in not knowing the answer. Because then you're working it through. You're working it through with the person who you're asking the question with. Yeah. So if you don't know the answer right away, you both figure out together. Or it's also that moment of faith where if you don't know the answer, you have to rely on your faith to be okay with not knowing. Yeah. Or relying on maybe you ask the question, but God's not ready to answer that yet. It's not the right time yet. And you have to be okay sometimes waiting and not knowing the answer to your question. Yeah, that would have been 25 more minutes.
I don't know. That was 3 minutes here. So.
Yeah, one of the moments that I tried to tease out to your point of like, I think there's a lot of mystery still within the context of the Christian faith, and not to be afraid of the mystery of the supernatural. There's a reason why we call it the supernatural.
Yeah.
It's supernatural, beyond that which we are accustomed to and consider to be normative. And so one of the places that I tried to tease it out within the context of the service to make that connection was in communion. Communion is like this supernatural, incredible, sacred experience for us as a church body. And so it's to say that I don't have all the answers. I don't quite understand how these things all work or all happen. There's a mystery to a lot of this, and yet I can have faith in it, and I can believe in it, and it can hold me even as I hold on to it. And I think communion is one of those moments too. So
absolutely, and I think this really leads us into our first question today.
Oh, good.
So I know you talked about this. You know how sometimes in our background in our history, there'll be a lot of times where we'll be pressured that doubt or having questions isn't a good thing. And so my question is, how have you at all navigated this personally, and how has that shaped how you've been able to have spiritual conversations or ask spiritual questions and things like that, or just questions in general with people?
So I grew up in a very traditional church that when you had a question, you had a scripted answer, and that was the answer, right? Like you didn't.
Oh yeah. Okay.
You didn't get any other response. Whatever the answer was, it was probably from Luther's Small Catechism, and that was the answer. And so there wasn't any more discussion needed after that, because it was in Luther's Small Catechism, it was in the Bible, and that was the answer. And I think for me, it made me a lot more curious, like in general, just like, well, why did he say that? Why is that the answer? Why is there another side to it, right? Like, is there, what would somebody else say about it? And so I'd never really learned that like dialectic, able to like talk about it when somebody disagreed with what Luther said. If somebody disagreed with it, I didn't know what to do with that because I was only taught these are the answers, right? And so I think as I grew and matured in my faith, I like love the questions now, right? Like I love like learning all of the sides of why people might believe something. So yeah.
I'd go so far as to say, like, I find questions helpful for my faith and can be encouraging to my faith, ironically. I'm at heart a systematician is the fancy term, but it's like I really love what is that in theology, right? So like in pastoral ministry, different pastors have different strengths. Systematic theology is like doctrinal thinking through the process and the function of our theology, and that's I really enjoy that stuff. And so The beauty of being able to discover some of those answers, that's what a lot of theology tries to do, is to find answers and discuss answers and try to apply answers. But in doing so, you have to be able to welcome the questions. You have to be willing to chase down the questions and consider the questions. I think as I've matured, I've become more comfortable with knowing there are certain questions I will never get the answer to. I think previously, I had a drive to always no, there's an answer there. I just can't find it, or I just can't see it. And now I'm much more ready to throw up my hands and be like, I don't know. I won't get an answer in that, and I'm okay not getting an answer there, because it's ultimately a relationship of trust and faith. And so there are some things that are just simply beyond my scope and beyond my ability to grasp. So.
Yeah.
I think questions are one of the fastest ways, at least for myself, that I can understand Scripture. So a lot of times when I'm reading it, I'm like, what is he trying to say?
What is this?
Right.
I don't get this. And just its interpretation. But when somebody asks a question, when I can ask a question, I can get a deeper understanding from somebody else who does understand it more than I do. Or we both have a question that we come to it together. I always love that the Bible is a living word, because the word's constantly changing as we are changing. So a scripture that we may not have understood before, as we go through life, now we can look back at that scripture and go like, now I understand. Back then, I would have had no clue, which was why I was asking the questions. Right. But now, so that when you ask other people in different spans of life, you get their insights on the scripture as well and what's going on. So, yeah, scripture's questions are curiosity to me.
Yeah, questions aren't necessarily a sign that something is wrong, right?
Right.
Just because we have a question just doesn't mean that something is wrong. Like questions allow us to grow and understand and deepen our faith, which is incredible. I was spending some time in Mark this week, and I was looking at the story of when Jesus healed a demon-possessed boy. And the father was coming up to him asking to heal his son. And when he asked, he said, "If you can." And that there's questions, there's doubt there, right? And Jesus is like, well, what do you mean if I can? Anything is possible with me, right? And then he says, as I have it in front of me, he says, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. Like, Jesus is here for us, ready to help us overcome those things. He can meet us in our questions and with our questions, and that's powerful, and that's good.
I think it's very good. We have to be aware as Christians when somebody asks us the question to not be judgmental. I think that's where it can't go the other direction, where somebody has been hurt because they asked a question and we're like, you don't know that? You're done. I'm done at that point. I'm done. And so we have to be very willing to accept there is no dumb question. There really isn't a dumb question.
I love questions, right? Like, I love being asked questions. I love asking questions. I think you get a deeper understanding of the scripture, but also the person that's reading it, the person that's asking you questions, right? Like, you can see their hurt, you can see their joy, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mentioned this on Sunday too, I'm particularly conscious of those who always have all the answers. I'm just a little bit slower, we'll say. I'm a little bit more cautious when engaging with someone who is quick. Well, just like the Bible says, right? Be quick to listen, slow to speak. When they're quick to speak, quick to give the right answer, because they always have the right answer. I mean, it goes back to what you're talking about, the disposition of humility, I think is a big deal there. So, the irony is, even if you don't have questions, I'm like, really? Does that mean you have all the answers? That's just a hard concept for me to wrestle with. Anyways.
That's a hard one.
Me too. So many.
Well, there's a difference too between knowing scripture and memorizing it and living it. Living it out, and living it out gets tricky.
Yeah, because spitting out an answer is different than living into an answer in a tangible, real way.
Correct. But that takes humility on our part too, and that's another message.
Oh my goodness. Well, so then here's another question I have today. Have you ever been asked a question, just any question, that's led to a deeper spiritual conversation in an unexpected way?
I have one. It's very unexpected. So when my children were little, my daughter was really sick, and we were in and out of the hospital a lot. We spent a lot of time inpatient. we spend a lot of time at the doctors in general, and so we got to like personally know some of these doctors. And a particular cardiologist had been following Gabby. He was inpatient with her, and he was we would visit him at the doctor's office. I don't know. It felt like every week, but it probably wasn't that often. But one day he asked us, and he said, "How are you guys so joyful and calm when everything else around you seems like it's falling apart? Like you have sick kids, you have babies, you have older kids." I mean, he was like, your life would seem that it's out of control, but you two both seem so cool, calm, and collected. And it just led us to that, it's not us who's doing it, right? Like it's God who's in control of this. And he has Gabby, he has CJ, he has us, he has Will, he has our whole family, right? He is the one that's in control of it all. And we're just here doing his will, right? And so it led to a lot of conversations the more we went to the doctor. He would always ask us, just like random questions about faith when we would go to the doctor. But it was very unexpected and not what you expect to talk about at the cardiologist, but but it was just really good. And it was like, for us, it was really like meaningful that he saw that in us when, we felt like life was also kind of crazy, right? But he saw a calmness in us that can only come from God. It was only God, not us.
I know in experiences I've had that when I ask a question and I get a different answer than I was expecting or something, took it in a different, it's usually because there's something that's been waiting, just like bubbling beneath the surface, right? Just been sitting there percolating for a little while. And the person like wants to talk about it and you just have no idea. You don't even know it's there, right? You're like, oh, stepped in that. Surprise, right? And it often it's related to some significant hurt or pain or emotional experience that they've had in their life, whether it's related to their faith or to the church or their parents or upbringing. Family of origin is always really, really big in people's lives. And so that's been my experience, is that sometimes it doesn't go the way you're thinking or the way that you would imagine, because there's something that is hiding just beneath the surface. And it's kind of like the Titanic. You ask a question, simple question, often a simple or what you would consider to be a softball, easy spiritual question.
How you doing today?
Yeah. Oh, what's up? Wow, right? All this is going on underneath the surface, and it just needed the opportunity for somebody to prompt it, to ask that question. And so forth. So yeah,
and that's the importance of the surface level questions and like the deeper dive questions.
Yeah,
because surface level is like, oh, how's your day going today? That's a pass by question.
Yep.
I want to know, but I don't want to know. Whereas the deeper level questions is actually getting to that part. Because you can kind of see it too in people's eyes as their physical expression when you ask a question, but there's something there, and it just takes that little bit of poking, and then you notice that. It has surprised me too, though, because you ask some of the questions and just knowing what somebody's gone through is like, hey, how are you handling this? And just boom, it's like, okay, they needed that question at that point. Yep. I wasn't ready for the deep dive, but
we're going.
We're there. We're there. We're doing it. Yep.
I think those are fantastic, and I have a story to share. Not my story, somebody else's story that they shared with me yesterday. But I was thinking about how, through this series, we've talked about things in an order, right? Like we've gone from the heart to the eyes to the hands to the ears and to the mind, right? Nice. Right? I got that right?
Good.
Yes. Well, sometimes, occasionally, like some of it is out of order.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this isn't like a perfect formula that we follow every single time. Yeah. So I'll share this story and I'll put it a little bit more into context. But I have a friend who was traveling for work, and she had to go to this little airport in the middle of nowhere, and she was waiting for her flight, and there's like 8 people there waiting to get on this plane. And she noticed just a young girl. She said she couldn't have been like more than 19, 20, very young. And she was clutching one of those weighted stuffed, I don't know what they're called, weighted stuffies. And she just noticed like something was going on. There was this young woman was really distraught, and so she just went up to her and asked her a simple question about, oh, where did you get that weighted stuffy? I think my daughter has one just like it. Oh, you have this one. She has this one, and just opened up just a little bit of a conversation, and then said, hey, you seem like something is going on. Are you okay? And she shared with my friend that her mom had just died. And she was in the military, and she got sent home to take care of all of the things associated with your mother dying. And so here's my friend just sitting in an airport, and all she asked was, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? And this woman just shared everything that was going on. And it gave her an opportunity. She has lost a parent, my friend had lost a parent within the last couple of years, and so she was able to to help her, because this was the fear, right? What's going to happen? What am I going to have to do? What are all these details? What's the funeral home? And so she was able to share, like, this is what you can expect, and answer her simple, basic questions. And the young woman asked my friend, you seem like, just similar to your situation, you seem like you're, this is recent for you. You seem like you're really calm and you have this all together. Is this because you have some sort of a faith? And all of a sudden, the conversation moved from just listening and answering her questions to this spiritual conversation on a deeper level. But it didn't happen in this prescribed order. Like she noticed. She was like, "Oh, I have the heart to go and sit down, and I'm gonna just listen. I'm gonna ask questions here." And it didn't happen in order, but it led to something so much deeper for my friend to be able to share the gospel, to share about Jesus, to share about prayer and spending time in the Word and all of that. And I think it's interesting because more than likely, they didn't exchange phone numbers. That they're never again. They're never going to see each other again. Maybe they will, but it's just very unexpected and kind of a combination of what all of you shared as well.
It was just that one question. It was the one question she asked, and that was what was needed to build trust and to be able for her to answer it too. Because wow.
Well, and all of the things we've talked about in the past few weeks, taking the time to just sit and listen and kind of slow everything down, set everything aside to build that trust.
Yeah.
So. Are we ready for the next question?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
We're ready for the next question. Have you ever been asked a question within the context of a spiritual conversation that you didn't have the answer to?
So many.
So many. Whoa.
You talked about some of these that you get answers to. So
I answered this on Sunday.
You could have a pass for this. So Sarah, Bill.
Thank you. Come on, you guys.
I think sometimes when these conversations come up, like, I can't always think fast on my toes, right? Like, I can't, like, the words don't always come exactly the way I would like them to. So I think sometimes I feel frustrated that the person that I'm talking to might have a different viewpoint than me, and they have all of their scripted answers, right? So we might be having a conversation and they have all of their scripted answers, but I may not have the answers to them when I'm having that conversation. Now, if I would go back and think about it and pray about it, I would probably have the right words to say, right? But I think I get really frustrated sometimes about that, is that, like, if I don't have what I feel is the right answer, but sometimes just ending the conversation is the right way to do it, because they're not probably going to change their thoughts, maybe because of what I could or couldn't say, but going back and then helping myself come up with, like, not scripted answers, but, like, when this is said again, what could I say, right? But I think that's where I always fall. I feel frustrated sometimes when I can't answer exactly what they're hoping that I answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I definitely feel the same way.
Yeah.
I think as I've gotten older, I was like, well, Whatever I say is what I say now.
Yeah.
I think back in my 20s and 30s, I probably like I have to be really careful. I'm like, whatever. So we're just gonna be honest now.
I think you bring up a really good point, though. So this last week was about asking questions, and the assumption there is that we're asking questions of others, and that we need to be ready to receive questions, like you just said. And yet, on Sunday, I warned people, don't ask leading questions or assumptive questions. Doesn't mean you're not going to receive leading questions and assumptive questions, questions with agendas, right?
Right.
And so if somebody is, talking with you with a very narrow, prescriptive sense of what is right, wrong, moral, theologically correct, etc., it can be really hard in those particular moments to respond and welcome a question because again, this is why it's important to ask good questions, compelling questions with genuine curiosity and authenticity, because we know what it's like to receive a question that's not that way. And it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
It's like, come on.
Yeah. Agreed.
Getting backed into a corner or something like that so that somebody's trying to get you into a particular, and in those cases, you're right. I think you have a lot of wisdom there, Sarah. Like sometimes it's better just to shut the conversation down and step away. Because they don't want to know your answer as much as give you an answer, which means we're back to where we started.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
They want you to receive their answer that they already have.
Right. Which is why they have their answer already set.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
There's a reason why Jesus answered questions with questions
Yes.
so often.
Yes. So much.
Because sometimes people
Flip it
have
back,
an
man.
agenda, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, because they have something on their mind, something on their heart, something that they're struggling with. An agenda doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? It just something that they need or want or anything like that. But
Oh, you're right, though. Jesus specifically, flips
Yeah.
it back up. The Pharisees often want to trap him. You ever
Yeah.
been in one of those verbal traps before?
Yeah.
Where somebody wants to trap
Yep.
you in a conversation. It's like Jesus flips that back on his head.
You're very good about answering a question with another question. You do it a lot, which is very clever. Because I'm like, I wasn't ready for that. Because now I'm stuck. I don't know the answer, and it was supposed to be my question. But yeah.
Billy, you shared earlier.
try it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a deeper one. Well, not a deeper one. I have a good one. I was talking with somebody who is kind of questioning faith or not sure what faith is. So we're going through why do you follow Jesus? So we follow Jesus because God is love. God told us that we are to love one another. So the question in response is very hard. If we're supposed to be all loving, then why are Christians kind of jerks? Why are we just
Welcome to Christ Church,
just how can we not show compassion to others? Why are we? And
why do we struggle with that, right?
Yeah.
why? Yes, and it's very hard to answer that, especially in the conversation you're just having, because they're just like, I don't see the difference. Why should I do this? That's where I kind of got stuck. I was like, oh, that's a very real question. And my answer eventually was because we're sinful as well. We keep messing up too.
Yeah.
We do want to show love to one another. It's not always easy to do. But we have faith that we can because God first loved us. That's how, and that's why we serve too, because God first served us. But it's hard to understand that when you see the brokenness of somebody's personality or just their tendencies. That one's a hard one when they ask that question.
Yeah, I think the situation though that you described, like you have found an answer, right? And you're leaning into whatever it is, and it's like the left field question that you weren't expecting. You had no idea what's coming. And sometimes it's not that you don't or might not have an answer, but you are caught so off guard that you don't know what to say in that moment. And I think we all have those, those moments and times. And sometimes what I have found is again, in asking the question with a question, right? Slowing down and maybe getting more to the root, because something happened to that individual.
Oh,
right?
they were definitely hurt by somebody.
Somebody hurt
Something in the
them.
backdrop.
Something happened. And so, turning it back around on that a little bit, not in a bad way, but also giving yourself a little bit more time to answer the question or to help them answer the question as well is is a reason we ask questions and gives us the space to take the space we might need.
Yeah.
So I want to jump in there to acknowledge the importance. You just brought up a really good tool, and you made reference to it earlier, Bill, of like, I'm a big fan of asking questions, just like Jesus did in response to questions. So one of the simple things you can ask someone is just like, what makes you, before I answer, I'm just curious, what makes you ask that question? What makes you bring that up?
Yeah.
Tell me why.
See, I never
that's a
think
good
of that.
question.
It's afterwards. It's like, that would have been really good thing, but I never think of it.
So if somebody's asking you a question that you don't know the answer to, appreciate it, acknowledge it, and then just before I answer, I love that. Such a good question. Tell me why is that in your mind, in your heart? Tell me more about why that's a good question.
See, I keep going to the exact opposite. I'm not very situationally aware. We're in Starbucks. They just said that word. Who's everybody else around me? I'm not thinking of the backstory. Yeah.
I think we're all that's all something we always are going to struggle with. But I think too, when we talked about all of these different things, these tools in our toolbox that we have, right, for these spiritual conversations, and we talked last week at length about listening, and because we don't want to step in something either, right? We may have they could come at us with a that question, and for some reason in that moment we're like, oh, I got an answer to that, but it may actually push it further, right? And push whatever bring whatever their hurt is, whatever their issue is out. And so taking more time to listen in those, just because we've gotten to the asking questions part of it, doesn't mean it isn't incredibly valuable to go back. And it is especially valuable to go back to that listening aspect of it as well. And so I think that your situation just is a great illustration for times we kind of backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
It makes me think of a difficult thing that I remember hearing about previously, but I think it's valuable about checking our assumptions with certain questions. When certain questions are asked, we have to be careful about making assumptions in relation to that question. I remember once hearing a gentleman speak where his heart was hurt by something he had done on accident, which was he was in a spiritual conversation with someone and was debating some theology with that person, and it had to do with loss of life and the taking of one's own life. And somebody they were debating, and the gentleman didn't know until after the conversation had happened, the person that he was debating with theologically, their spouse, had taken their own life. And so he looked back at that, and he walked away feeling like such a failure because he had made the assumption that this was a theological debate, and the manner in which he approached it and the manner in which he carried out it, he said, was a 180 as to what I should have done. And so I should have been more careful. I should have listened and even just asked questions to get at some of the context. And situational awareness, to even know what is the situation that I'm engaged in this spiritual conversation with, to pick up on body language, intonation, etc. The guy was so convinced in trying to provide answers and make a theological point, he didn't know the backdrop was so significant, right? So, we just have to be very careful about our assumptions. You have to ask good questions to unearth things before you start throwing around quote-unquote answers.
Well, that's a great example because he probably did have the right theological answer, but how you can bring it in a Christian way
exactly right.
where we love, where we support.
Yes.
Even though we might not agree on an answer, but you can do it in a Christian way.
The way you do it matters.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right. So
I think that's we talked about this again when we're listening. What happens if sometimes the other person says something wrong, or something you don't agree with, or something that doesn't track with what your theological belief is, or anything like that, and that's that same vein, right? Yep. So one of the things I was thinking about with being asked questions and not having the answer is I really think that this is scary for a lot of people. We work here at Christ Church, and we have spiritual conversations all the time. And there are so many people here that don't and are just learning to step into this. And so I wanted to take some time to acknowledge that, like, this is not, we get that it's scary.
Yep.
And we all started from where it was scary. And we all had to have our first.
It's still scary for us sometimes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, especially when we don't have an answer or don't have the right answer or any answer, or, but I think acknowledging that again, you had said this earlier, it's not always about having the right answer. It's just about faith, right? It's that we know God. He knows us. He comes to us through Jesus, and that's powerful in itself. And it's not bad to say, I have to check on that. I actually don't know. I'm curious myself. We can grow together as we come up with that answer together. And so as I was, thinking about this week and acknowledging this is really hard for a lot of people, I was thinking about Moses and the story of Exodus, and when God calls him and is like, "Come on, you're gonna lead the people. You're gonna take them out of Egypt, and you're the man. You're gonna do it." And he's like, "Whoa,
Nope.
absolutely
Not interested.
Absolutely not." And he literally says, like, "I can't." I know this is like maybe it's a little bit into next week, but we're talking, right? We're asking the questions, and Moses is worried that like he's not gonna have the right words. He's not gonna be able to talk. How can I do that? And God's response is, "Who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you in what to say." Just remembering that, we have the Spirit with us. And that doesn't mean we still can't say, "I don't know."
Yeah.
And there's value in that too when we don't know, because it helps people see that we're the same as others, and we have doubts ourselves, or we have questions ourselves, and all of those things are most certainly true. Okay, here's my next question. Do you have any, I should say, what are some common questions that you may have received in spiritual conversations? Common questions you get asked. Pastor Andrew, you had a bunch of these on your slide, but just wondering if Bill or Sarah, you come across some common
questions that you get asked, or
like
that we
you
ask
get
other
asked,
people?
like spiritual questions that you get asked. So like your first question was, do pets go to heaven, right?
That was
yeah.
often. A lot of people want to know about end times.
Yeah, that's
a very common question.
Forgiveness. That comes up to me a lot. How do you truly forgive? It's a weighted one, because forgiving isn't like, there is forgiveness, but there's also barriers too. You put in barriers to protect yourself with forgiveness. So forgiveness, I get a lot of questions within small groups and different things as you go through. Forgiveness seems to be a topic that get a lot of.
Shameless plug. For
I
was waiting for the opportunity. But yeah, small groups are the best place to ask all these questions. That's what they're there for.
And I was
Ask
going
all
to
these
shameless
questions.
plug our sermon series after Easter is the grudge about forgiveness. So
Yeah.
just double
that was
shameless
convenient.
Double plug.
Nice.
Just a double plug.
Yeah.
That's forgiveness.
Yeah.
I get that one quite a bit as well.
Wait, Sarah, your specialty is working with little ones. I'm really curious.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we get a lot of questions about pets. That's like
That's a big one.
What does heaven look like? We get that one a lot.
That's a good one.
I also work with some of the middle schoolers and high schoolers.
Yeah.
We get a lot of questions. I mean, we just had one on Sunday night about what the end times, like Jesus coming back, and I'd never heard the question before. So,
From middle school,
yeah, and just so a lot of end times with the middle schoolers, I think that's a really like time where they start to like
Yeah, conceptually, developmentally.
Yeah, like start to develop what, that this isn't going to last forever, right? A lot of questions about what if my friends don't believe and I believe, how can, I really want them to believe because I want them to go to heaven, right? So like how to navigate kind of that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, that's a really that makes me think world religions. I get questions a lot.
Yes, world religion.
Me too.
Yeah.
Like different
stuff.
denominations,
Different denominations.
even
I get denomination
even
stuff.
within Christianity, different like.
And I think sometimes kids are starting to like realize that their grandparents may go to, a Catholic
One type of
church,
church,
and we go to this
different one.
my cousins go to,
Yep.
this other type of church, like which one is right, that kind of stuff about like what is the right religion. We talk about that a lot.
PA, do you get a lot of salvation questions like, what about the people who don't believe?
Sure, if they don't
And
hear.
if they don't, or they don't hear, that one specifically. If nobody ever told them about Jesus,
Yeah,
I
those
get
are big
quite a
ones.
bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's some more niche questions that if you are a Christian, even Christians continue to have questions. Some of the popular questions that I get for those who already are Christian are things like spiritual gifts, speaking in tongues, certain biblical interpretations, and things like that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of common questions, and it's nice to know that those questions are held in common in so much as we're not alone. Right? We're not alone in asking one of those things.
Yeah, I nominate all these questions we've just brought up. I nominate PA to just start answering.
Rapid fire. I don't know.
That's a great answer. So I did get one audience submitted question. You can submit your questions, podcast@christchurchmec1.org. So we have 1 week left, so get any questions you might have. But I do have one audience submitted question, and I'm sorry I didn't get it to you ahead of time because I just got it. But it's, how do I ask questions without sounding like I'm interrogating someone?
Use a nice voice.
I think go at it with like true curiosity, right? Like sometimes we ask questions and it's like to know the answer, right? Like when you're in school, teachers ask you questions to know the answer, right?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
But go at it like actually curious. Like there is no right or wrong answer. I want to like know you and know where you're at about the answer, right? And not there isn't a right or wrong answer. And it also, I think, goes with last week's too, with like listening, right? Like truly listen to their answer. Don't have like a preconceived notion of what their answer might be, but go in it like truly curious and wanting to know where they're at with the answer.
I think your question will be when it's authentic like that or genuine, your question will just come because you're in the conversation.
Yeah.
The question will come. So then it's not, if it's a leading question, it's because that was the question.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way. That will come organically as you come through the conversation. But I mean, if you want to get deeper on purpose, then you can ask questions that they're not leading, but you want to say, when did you see this in your life? When have you experienced something like this? It opens up a faith conversation. Instead, like, because those are open to interpretation. There's not a right answer to these type of questions. It's I want to hear your experience. What have you seen in your life?
And sometimes people aren't ready to answer them, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think we have to be okay with that as well.
Yes.
Like that maybe we do want to get to know them, but they're not ready for us to do that yet. And so just give them the opportunity another time, or like when you're, if you ever have more questions, I'm really happy to have these conversations again.
And then switch to cheese curds.
We laughed earlier when I said like use a nice voice, but I think there's also very tactically and very practical. There is value in understanding how. Let's go back to like how you ask a question and the disposition. Like if you're genuinely curious, people will pick up on that, right? We have pretty good radars when it comes to like inauthentic, like crap radars, right? People they sniff you out. You know what I mean? Like, but like if you are genuine, you're kind, you're thoughtful. You're using soft words. You don't use body language is huge. Like the posture that you take if you're looking on your phone and you're just like flipping out stuff or whatever when you're having questions, that does not have the same effect as adopting an open posture. if I'm sitting back with my arms crossed
Yeah.
and I have a frowny face and I'm asking these questions like this, it's like, that's got a different type of contextual feel. It doesn't show curiosity as much as prove my answer is correct, as opposed to open, empathetic, kind, soft tones, making yourself not big and dominating with your physical posture, but a little more wrapped in and a little bit more submissive, adopting a posture of willingness and vulnerability. I think is really, huge, and that can be conveyed in your body and your tonage and all those different aspects. So those are some tactical things that you can do, really practically.
I always think about that as being turned in. You're not just tuned in,
But-
you are like turned in to someone.
Yep, that's good.
Yeah, and I think not asking questions, you don't always have to ask a question, right? Like you don't have to ask a question for the sake of asking a question. And sometimes sitting in silence with something
Yes.
is okay. You don't have to fill it, because more often than not, I think people will fill that silence.
They'll jump in.
Spoke with someone yesterday, and I didn't say anything, and they paused like 6 times, and I just didn't say anything. And the longer the more times I paused, actually, the deeper they
went.
got
Yeah.
and what they shared.
Yes.
So we don't have to always answer questions. I know this is not quite the question of how does it sound like I'm not interrogating, but if we're asking questions just because we feel like we have to ask questions, or
PA said this is the next step.
I already listened to you. Now I need to.
Which we are saying they're not steps, by the way. They are not steps. These are all tools.
oh, that's good.
funny.
That's good. Okay, well, I have one final question today. Do you have any good questions that you ask that seem to help people open up or engage more? Any specific questions that you like to ask? I know we've shared a couple of them.
Yeah. Well, because I have to create the questions each week for our small groups. So what part of my job here is to create those conversations that can go somewhere. So not have an answer that is a yes or no, that they strike a conversation. So part of them is just like, have you seen something in your life? What does this mean to you? To see truly like, how does what we're talking about, how do you see that in your life? And once you reflect on it, then you go deeper in conversations, because now everybody has a moment where they have or they haven't, and they can talk to each other on how they do it. So mine are questions to keep the conversation going or go deeper.
I'd say my go-to question with most people, it sounds really silly, but it's just, would you say more? Would you tell me more? Kind of that thing of,
You stole my first question.
oh, yeah, yeah, good. It's just like, that's a go-to question in terms of like creating the space again to listen for that much more. To listen, because they will fill that space. So would you just tell me more about that, would you? That's easily one of the best questions. Would you tell me more about that?
I think that goes hand in hand with just clarifying questions, right? Like, when you say that, what do you mean? And you said earlier, like, go back, tell me about your experience with this, those clear, so that we understand and we can take some more time to listen.
Yeah.
One of my favorite questions with the middle school girls when we do small group is they do like their highs and lows. And when they do a high or they do a low, right, it's like, well, where did you see God in that? So like this was your high for the week, but like, why was it your high? Where did you see God, right?
That's good.
Yeah. And even sometimes in their low, like, hey, that was a low, but did you see God working through this, right? Or what did you
Nice.
learn? Or,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can use it with adults too, but.
So any other last thoughts, any final thoughts today on our discussion about asking good questions, about wondering? Nothing?
Nothing.
You got nothing today?
Do you
What?
want to accept the Lord Jesus Christ?
Not a good question.
Don't lead with that
Leading
one.
question. It's a very leading question.
Well,
Leading
with
question.
that, I say thank you so much for joining us this week for our podcast about asking good questions. We hope you join us next week as we actually talk about talking. We get to the
about
mouth
talking.
next week. Yep. So on behalf of Bill, of PA, of Sarah, myself, Joe on cameras, John in the back, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next week.